Hey, Myles here at Tactical Hyve. Welcome to another Force and Force Fridays. As you can tell, I am not at the range. We're going to be changing this one up and addressing a common question that we get about Force and Force, and that is how to get the most out of a Force and Force training class. Welcome back. So Force and Force training, if you're not familiar with it, is the most realistic training that you can get out there. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people recommend it. And it's one of the reasons we offer a lot of Force and Force classes and really encourage everyone to do it at least once. And if you can do it more, the better. But there's one challenge. It can be expensive. The reason being is non-lethal rounds are more expensive. The organizations have to hire role players, as well as insurance, things like that. So costs add up, and that cost has to be paid for, right? So students are generally going to have to pay a higher amount versus your traditional firearms training class. Is it worth it? It still absolutely is worth it because it's very different from your flat range training. It is very different from just normal target practice, but it is expensive. So we want to share some tips that we've gathered from teaching hundreds of students across the nation so that you can get the most out of a Force and Force training class if you decide to attend one. The first tip is pretty simple. Make sure you're going to the right Force and Force class. That's going to allow you to really enjoy the experience, match it with your skill level, and match it with what you're looking for. I say that because a lot of people, they will go into any Force and Force class and maybe they don't realize that the Force and Force class they're attending is more militaristic in style. Maybe it is combined with team members, teammates, kind of like an assault unit in the military. Whereas civilians, they're probably not going to use those skills or need those skills in their own personal situations or personal lives. So doing that, let's say you're looking for more civilian scenarios and you go into a class where they're putting in scenarios in clearing structures, well, then you're not going to have fun and it can even be dangerous. And you might even get discouraged. For civilians, there are also different types of Force and Force classes where some might include a little bit of hand-to-hand, some combatives. Whereas with other Force and Force classes, it might just be about that initial contact where you read the problem, make a quick decision, and either get your gun in the fight or de-escalate a situation where you're not really going hands-on, kicking, punching, or things like that. And that's going to allow you to get the most out of it because you know exactly what you signed up for. The second tip to get the most out of a Force and Force training class is to not game it. Now, this is something that's really difficult for a lot of people because you're going into a class, you know there are going to be role players who are attacking you, there's going to be problems that arise, but a lot of people, when they go in, a lot of students, they now know that they're carrying concealed, they have a gun. They usually have hero complex in the beginning, thinking that they have to pull out that gun and use it and throw down on somebody, even when the situation doesn't call for it. And that's completely fine. That's normal. It happens a lot. But what you want to do is you want to understand that if you treat this real and not game it, you're going to get the most value out of it. And now let me give you a bad example here of gaming it. Ask yourself, if you go to an ATM, or let's just take the average person, if someone is going to an ATM at a bank, supermarket, anything, are they constantly looking around them, even like literally put the card into the ATM machine and start looking around and not looking at the ATM machine whatsoever? Honestly, that doesn't really happen. And maybe there's some outliers, but most people, if they glance around them, they will, but they're not going to look around them 99% of the time. They're going to spend a lot of time looking at the machine and putting their code, things like that. We'll have students who they're in an ATM scenario and they're not even looking at the ATM, where how can you even use the ATM if you're not even looking at it? You're not inputting your code and things like that. And that's gaming it because they're like, okay, I know something's going to happen, right? So you don't want to game it. You want to make it real. And by doing so, you're going to elicit natural reactions and it's going to force you to problem solve and decision make more closely to what you will expect or encounter in real life. In line with not gaming it, when you're put into scenarios And we've all watched media, news, and things like that. And perhaps you're in a scenario where you're at a bank and all of a sudden just, these stereotypes, we're in a bank, we're in this Force and Force class, maybe it's going to get robbed, right? So now you already have an idea. Even though you do have that idea, try not to look out for things. Like, just think about how you would really react in that situation. Because again, if you game it, then you're going to be losing out on the true value of that scenario. Number 3, mindset, and this is huge. Go into every scenario thinking that what's happening is real. If you're assigned a role player who's supposed to be your husband or your wife or your daughter or your son, then take some time before the scenario starts to really ingrain that. Visualize that. Really do whatever you need to do to make it real. Have that mindset that this is not, it is fun and games. Force and Force is fun and games, but you need to make it real to get the most value. And when you begin to think that the role player you are assigned with who's supposed to act as a loved one really is your loved one, you're going to act differently. You're going to behave differently. You may not shoot wildly as if you thought it was a game and you weren't with a loved one. Doing that, again, is going to provide tremendous value for you because it adds a layer of stress. And for a lot of our students, and even for myself, there are times where I pretend that it's my daughter that I need to protect in this scenario. And if you fail that scenario, and it's okay, everyone fails, because this is one of those things where it's easy to armchair quarterback, but the 99% of the armchair quarterbacks have never put themselves in scenarios like this and don't understand the stress and the difficulty of it. But if you do fail, and when you had the proper mindset, that's going to light a fire, inside you, where you realize, like, oh my gosh, like I didn't do well. I just killed my daughter, or I just wasn't there for my son, or whatever it might be. But that is going to allow you to look at things differently. It might open up your eyes to a whole new world that you never thought about. So this way you can better protect yourself, better prepare, better protect your family. So mindset is huge. Go into these scenarios. Yes, it's fun and games, but the true learning is going to happen if you think of it as real life. And the last tip to get most out of your Force and Force training is to go into the class not thinking about getting legal answers. We are not lawyers. A lot of the other organizations, the instructors are not lawyers. Most people do not hire legal counsel to attend those classes. And even if there's a lawyer in the class or a lawyer is an instructor, the truth is we all know that laws are different state to state, as well as when a case goes into court, you never know. Everyone might think it's a black and white shut case, then there's a loophole or something, and then the case gets thrown out. So don't go in there trying to debate about legalities. A lot of the institutions out there will talk about things. They'll go, if you're in a state where this is allowed, then maybe you'll get away with it, maybe you won't. Then they'll talk about maybe a different state where, okay, if you're here, you're probably not going to be able to do that, but they're never going to give you 100% legal answers. Again, no one's an attorney, and it's just so complex. And if you go into these classes not thinking about trying to get legal answers, then you're going to spend more time in the actual training itself and get a lot more value from that. Now, you will talk about some legal aspects, okay, but that's not the point of the training. If you want true legal answers, then after you go into a scenario, and let's just say after you do a scenario, people are usually going to debrief, the instructor's going to talk, and students will talk with one another and give insights, and maybe some legal issues come up, but again, no one's going to really give defined answers. If you're curious, based on that scenario, for your life, note down what it is. And if you really want the answers, talk to a lawyer. Now, even that said, the lawyer is probably also going to tell you it depends, but it can give you more clarification. So that finishes up this video. We know there's a lot of viewers who want to get in Force and Force training. So hopefully these tips allow you to get the most out of your investment. And if you've decided it's time for you to take that next step and do Force and Force training, check out our class calendar. I'll leave a link below and up here. And we are holding Force and Force classes across the nation in 2023. We already have about a dozen or so classes up, and we'll be adding more. So take a look, and if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. Let us know what you think in the comments. As always, guys, if you like the video, please give us a like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.